What's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about leveraged ETFs yet again. I made a couple of videos about a year ago going over what leveraged ETFs are, but I want to revisit the topic because it's a year later. I now feel like I understand leveraged ETFs better. I have now invested in a leveraged ETF, the TQQQ to be exact, for an extended, quote unquote, extended period of time now. And I now know how it fits into my investing strategy. So I want to debunk a couple of theories about them, show you the benefits, show you some risks, and how you can implement it into your investing strategy. Now, no, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't have a license, but that gives me the liberty to talk about leveraged ETFs the way I'm going to. If you ask a financial advisor, they're going to say, no, stay away from it. But what I've noticed is they really don't give you any reason why. They don't back it up with any facts or data. They just throw fancy words at you like time decay and futures contracts and a whole bunch of other jargon, but they're not actually telling you why. And I genuinely think, especially if you're young, it could be a very lucrative investment strategy. So we're going to dive into that. But before that, guys, check out my channel. I got tons of awesome videos talking about the stock market. And subscribe if you haven't already. I post every single week. Oh, and smash that like button to help boost the algorithm. But leverage ETFs. So you will find plenty of articles and again, listen to plenty of financial advisors strongly advise against leverage ETFs for the long term. They'll say it's for swing traders and day traders, and you can't hold on to it for the long term because you're just going to lose money. That's not true. I think what they really are trying to say is it's very volatile and the average person may not be able to deal with that volatility. I'll show you that in a minute, but there are plenty of other articles, especially from this guy, Dane, and you can check out this article. There will be a link in the description. He loves leveraged ETFs and he has plenty of articles talking about them. And he was one of the people that first turned me on to them. So you could read his article. It explains how leveraged ETFs are the worst investment ever. That's how they are labeled everywhere. But his article goes into how you could actually make a serious amount of money using leveraged ETFs. Now, one thing a lot of critics towards leveraged ETFs will say, and the one thing I do agree about, is they are expensive. Their expense ratio is more than 3 times higher than that of a regular ETF. So, for example, a regular ETF has an average expense ratio of 0.2%. Meanwhile, a leveraged ETF has almost 1%. That's pretty big for an expense ratio. But that doesn't mean not to invest in them. Just because there's a higher expense ratio doesn't mean it's a bad investment and doesn't mean it can make you a lot of money. So why is it a higher expense ratio? What's going on behind the scenes? Well, before we even talk about that, let's talk about your own leverage. If you don't want to buy a leveraged ETF or you don't know about leveraged ETFs, but you want to have leverage, let's say 3 times leverage, and you have $10,000, that means that the broker or the bank is going to give you an extra 20 grand. So now you have 3 times leverage. For the $10,000, you have $30,000 worth of buying power. Well, if the stock or ETF you invest in goes to zero, you're not going to lose just your 10,000, but you're also going to lose 20,000. What does that mean? It means you owe the broker now 20 grand and you're out that 10 grand. So you're in the hole for 30 grand. That's pretty risky, and a lot of people get into trouble trading on leverage. But the beautiful part about leveraged ETFs is you have that same $10,000. You do not need a margin account to invest in leveraged ETFs. You could have a regular cash account. You could throw all that money in there, and God forbid if that ETF goes to zero, you only lose the $10,000. You don't need to come up with extra money to pay the broker. That's what that expense ratio is for. You are paying them that premium for them to take on the risk. And then you get the 3 times rewards or losses for 0 extra risk. The only thing you're risking is what you actually put into it. Thus the thumbnail, 0 extra risk. But let's dive into actual leveraged ETFs. There's three major ones, and they all mirror the three major ETFs. What three major ETFs am I talking about? And I'm going to explain this little diagram or drawing that I have on here in a second. But we're going to look at the leveraged ETF of the S&P 500, the Invesco QQQ, and the Dow Jones DIA. So these are the regular ETFs. And we're going to look at the leverage ETFs and we're going to compare them. And the biggest thing I want to look at is the coronavirus. We had a massive drawdown in the market. If you were in the stock market during the coronavirus, it was a wild couple of weeks watching literally the entire market fall off a cliff. But how did the leverage ETFs fare in these? Because if a leverage ETF is supposed to give you 3 times the returns or 3 times the losses, you would think if we had a 35% drawdown for the S&P, then a leveraged ETF would probably crash down to zero. Wrong. That's not what happened, believe it or not. So this was the S&P 500. We were at $339 and we dropped all the way down to $218. That is a 35% drawdown. The leveraged ETF, the UPRO, you would expect to be 100%. It wasn't. It was only 78%. It was at $80 and it dropped all the way down to $17. The ticker is UPRO, and this is a 3 times leveraged S&P 500 ETF. So if the ETF goes up 1%, the leveraged ETF will go up 3%. If the underlying ETF goes down 1%, the leveraged ETF will go down 3%. And day to day, it's pretty accurate, and you will see it actually fluctuates like that. The UPRO, let's see, if we look at this day, went up today 1.48%. And then if we jump over to the S&P 500, it went up 0.53%. So there's almost a 3 times leverage there. And then let's see, yesterday, the S&P 500 went down 0.27%. Meanwhile, the UPRO went down 0.86%. So you could mess around with all those numbers, but we want to look at the major drawdowns because we're not caring about day to day. We're caring about the long term and, more importantly, the massive drawdown that happened during the coronavirus. Now let's look at the NASDAQ or the Qs. It was at $237 before the coronavirus crash, and it went all the way down to $164. That is a 30% drawback. You would expect the leveraged ETF, the TQQQ, to go down 90%. It only went down 72%. And here's the math, $59 down to $16. Guys, I'm just showing you the raw numbers here. Anyone could do this. It's not a hard equation. It's simple math. And what about the Dow? It was at $295 and it crashed down to $182. The biggest crash out of the three ETFs, negative 38%. So you'd think for sure the 3 times leverage had to go at least 95% down. Only 81%. Now I say only 81. If you're losing 81% in the course of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, a lot of you may panic sell. And that's the thing. It's risky in the sense that you are subjecting yourself to a lot of volatility, similar to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has had 80+% drops multiple times, but people who stayed in it also got some massive returns. And that's how I see leveraged ETFs. They're very similar to crypto, where crypto is massively volatile and you could get these massive upturns, but you have to know how to stomach or you have to deal with these massive drawdowns. So let's just do one more thing. Now this drawdown, if it's 35% for the regular ETF and 78% for the leveraged ETF, what about the bull run? How much is it actually worth it? For the regular S&P 500, from the bottom of the coronavirus, you got about a 115% return. For the UPRO, which is the S&P 500 times 3, you got a 739% return. So that is more than 3x. 3x for this would be around 345%. The UPRO, you are getting 739%. Why? Well, that's because of time decay, which works both ways. And I can't explain it anywhere as well as Dane. I think Dane has a couple of articles explaining time decay and how it actually works both ways. But this is a perfect example where you're actually benefiting, where the crash isn't as severe, and then the bull run is much greater than what it actually should be if we are doing a true 3 times leverage. Now let's look at the Qs. So we'll go to the bottom. This is just the regular Qs. It's about 140%. And from the bottom to the top of the leveraged, 970%. So again, much greater than that 3x. The last one, we have the Dow. Go all the way up, about 95%. And then for the 3 times, you got about 490% for the UDOW, or 3 times leverage Dow. So the numbers are here. You could see that not only are the drawdowns as bad, it's still a massive drawback, and it's still a scary number, and people may panic sell, but it's not like it's going to zero. And then what you could make, the potential upside is so great, where I think even investing a few percentage of your wealth is worth it. And that's exactly what I do. I have the TQQQ, which is the NASDAQ times 3, in my IRA. I only have 2 index funds in my IRA, the TQQQ and the regular S&P 500. Most of my money goes to the S&P 500, and next year I get $6,000 to invest. I'll probably invest at least $4,000 into the S&P 500 and maybe $2,000 into the TQQQ. Anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000. And why am I doing that? Well, it's to get alpha on top of the average expected 10%. Because here's $10,000 over 40 years, 10% return, you're looking at $450,000. Now, if I could just add 2 percentage points to it, so if I could get, instead of 10, if I could get 12%, that more than doubles my return. So with the TQQQ, I'm not even looking to get these crazy 10x returns over the course of a year and a half. I just want a few extra percentage points on my IRA, and it more than doubles my return over the long term. And God forbid, if it doesn't work out, and if we enter some massive bear market for the next, whatever, 2 or 3 years, and the TQQQ actually goes to zero, it's not the end of the world for me, because I'm only risking what I'm willing to lose, and most of my money in my IRA is still wrapped up in the S&P 500. And that's how I think other people should approach leveraged ETFs. Just expose yourself a little, expose yourself to a small percentage that you're willing to lose, even if it's just 1 or 2%. Because God forbid, if you lose that 1 or 2%, it's not really going to hurt you in the long run. You're not going to feel it. But with this crazy upside potential, I personally, again, not financial advice, my opinion, I personally think it's worth taking that maybe 1 or 2 or 3% risk. But that's what I got for you guys. That is leveraged ETFs. That is my strategy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you invest in leveraged ETFs? Do you think they're too risky? Could you stomach a massive drawdown like 72%? Again, let me know. And guys, as always, I will see you in the next one.